Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another series review. Today's series review is none other than One Piece Season 2. Now, I do apologise for the grand wait on this. I have been behind on this review for a while. This is all due to the fact that I am currently watching a lot of the animation. Now, on the animation side of this, I would just like to clarify that I am currently at the kind of pinnacle point of the series, in which I am watching through the Battle of Alabasta. And this is why I held off for so long from doing this review, specifically because I just wanted to make sure that everything that corresponds in Season 2 didn't conflict with where I'm currently up to in the cartoon. Now, the cartoon story arc decides to end off at the beginning of Chopper's adventure. So let's go back a bit and remind you of exactly what's happened leading up to that moment. Luffy and the Straw Hats have entered the Grand Line. Well, almost. They're right on the coast of the East Blue and they're about to embark on their journey, but it seems that they're a little bit low on supplies, so they decide to go to a marine outpost base. It turns out, though, that this marine outpost base also happens to be the very place that Monkey D. Luffy's icon, Golden Roger, was executed for being the king of the pirates. This draws the Straw Hats in and they all begin to go round the marketplace for separate things. Nami goes looking for maps and books to do with locating different pieces of the Grand Line and essentially everywhere across the world. She also goes shopping for new clothes. Usopp goes looking for new gadgets and new things he can add to his arsenal. Sanji goes looking for fresh food and takes Luffy along with him before Luffy goes wandering off because he's obsessed with the execution platform. And Zoro goes looking for a brand new sword. However, when he asks for a loan from Nami, of course, she points out to him that he can haggle for the sword, to which he goes, okay. Upon looking for a sword, Zoro finds himself in a position where he ends up purchasing a cursed sword. Well, I say purchases, it was kind of given to him alongside another sword. However, during this event, he finds himself in a conflict when he bumps into a girl who looks mysteriously like the girl that he let die when he was younger, due to the fact that she overworked herself. In the live action version, Nami decides to basically influence Usopp in giving his old kind of girlfriend a ring and essentially says, go on, I know you miss her. When Luffy eventually gets to the execution platform, he gazes up at it only to be encountered by Buggy and another pirate. Both pirates begin to joke about in the live action and in the cartoon about Luffy's position and essentially lock him in chains because of the fact that the chains they're using pretty much wear down anyone with the devil fruit and make them feel like they're underwater. This makes Luffy look very drunk, but when Luffy realizes that he's going to be executed, rather than begging for his life, he begins to call out to people and tell them he's dead. That's when the spirit of Golden Roger strikes the platform with lightning and saves Luffy's life. However, the Straw Hats now have another problem when the Marines get on their case. The following story after this then goes on to a whale who keeps hitting the Grand Line. After going through a belt of what appears to be rocks, the crew end up right on the other side of the Grand Line, opening up into their new voyage and a new adventure. Half the crew is swallowed inside of a giant whale whilst Luffy has to figure out a way to save them. Now, the only thing that was a major change in this, and I don't know if it was for budget reasons or what, But Laboon in the cartoon is basically built as a kind of giant inside of a mechanical kind of construct. However, in this story, rather than Luffy being inside the whale, most probably due to the fact that he can't swim, they find a different scenario in which Laboon still ends up bashing against the wall because he misses his old pirate crew, but Luffy manages to convince him that they will be his new crew. So the plot is only a little bit different, but not too much. The other thing that happens in this story before I move on to Little Garden is we're introduced to Princess Vivi and one of the Baroque Works members. Now, between the events of the Laboon story and the Little Garden story, there is another story I need to mention. There's a story which they called Whiskey Peak, I believe. Whiskey Peak is a story in which Vivi tricks the Straw Hat Pirates to go to an island in which they say that they love pirates, but really in reality, it turns out they've been poisoning and murdering them and placing their bodies on top of giant cactus graves. Now, the Straw Hat Pirates fall for it in a kind of weird and different way in this live action. In the original cartoon, they all just get very drunk and Zoro's the only one who doesn't drink. However, in the live action, Zoro does drink, but he pisses it out, and Nami picks up on a couple of the events along with Luffy due to the fact of overhearing them all kind of blurt things out too obviously in public. The only two who are truly tricked in this whole story is Usopp and Sanji, as two twins who begin to be hitting on the pair of them catch their attention. After Zoro kills about 100 Baroque Works agents and frees Usopp and Sanji, they then go off to essentially escape the island, but then find that Baroque Works is hunting down Princess Vivi. Now, originally they only knew Princess Vivi as Miss All Sunday. Now to move on to Little Garden, the crew along with Princess Vivi decide to head off once again to see the world. However, they're warned by one of the mysterious but very beautiful Baroque's Works agents that it appears that they are on their tail, and if they go to Little Garden, well, they're pretty much doomed. However, they don't listen and go to an island full of dinosaurs and giants. And upon getting there, it turns out that Mr. Free, a Candle Baroque Works agent, has been waiting there with his little assistant, a girl who has paint that is very hypnotic. Paints that make you feel things, all sorts of emotions, depending on which colour it is. She begins to track down the crew and take them out one by one whilst Mr. Candle gets ready to lock everyone inside of his candle wax. Eventually, Luffy manages to overpower him, and Usopp also points out that one of the giants had been poisoned previously in a battle that the pair of them had been having. Eventually, they manage to even free the giant and go off on their way for another adventure, but on their way from leaving Little Garden, they find themselves in a position in which they have a giant beast. Luckily, the two giants manage to kill the giant beast for them and allow them to go off on their way. The final story, which is in 3 installments in the live action, is the story of a doctor and a reindeer. This reindeer is none other than Chopper, who is a doctor who essentially was once seen as a freak. Now, Chopper's story is a bit of a tragedy. It turns out that they were born as a reindeer, but after they ate a devil fruit, they began to talk and could grow to different sizes. For this, they were shut out from their family, and ever since have been walking through the forest. When they tried to go to town, people started shooting at them, and the only person to take them in was a doctor who was on the run from the king of the kingdom. Drum Kingdom's king, who was a bit of a tyrant, eventually gets kicked out of the kingdom after an affair that happens when one of the doctors decides to blow himself up. However, before this doctor does everything in his power to teach Chopper as much of his doctor knowledge as possible, but knowing one day that he will die, he decides to go to the kingdom to blow himself up just so that the little reindeer doesn't get its heart broken. Eventually, the Straw Hats turn up to save the kingdom from its peril, and from the Drum King. But of course, they also turn up because Nami is very sick, and they try to go and find a doctor to help them. When they find out the only doctor is on a mountain and she's an old witch, they are a bit skeptical. But with Nami's health declining, they know they have no choice but to climb the hill. Eventually, they manage to get to the top of the hill. Nami gets cured, and they manage to defeat the king. Chopper leaves the kingdom once and for all and becomes a Straw Hat pirate. Now, that was my brief summary of this series, but I also should point out that there was a character known as Smoker and Crocodile. Smoker is a marine who is currently after the Straw Hat Pirates, and Crocodile is essentially Mr. Zero, the leader of Baroque Works. So, what did I think of One Piece Season 2? Now, I've got to say, I really like one major thing. Vivi's character is a little bit more stronger, I've got to say, just my personal opinion, in the live action. I feel like she moans less and definitely plays this very strong female character. The other thing I really like about the second season of the live action is the way that all of their backstories are starting to come together and culminate this kind of great group of outcasts. Usopp is also getting over his fears and becoming more determined. Zoro is learning to work with others, and Sanji is just being absolutely lovely to Nami. Well, can't blame him. But yeah, overall, this second season has been an absolute blast so far of what I've watched of it up to the end of it. And I really look forward to seeing what they come up with for season 3. And for that reason, I give this a solid 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next series review. Until then, goodbye. Stay beautiful, you beautiful people.